Thank you. The U.S. is in shock. The extraordinary confluence of a terribly managed pandemic, severe economic paralysis, egregious incidents of racial injustice, and runaway political polarization that culminated in a lethal attack on our nation's capital has profoundly destabilized the nation. I need to read that again? You feeling me on that? You need me? I'll read it again. You got it?
Yes, we are with you on it.
This is a quote from an opening op-ed written by Dr. Peter Coleman. Dr. Coleman is a lecturer and executive director of Columbia University's School for Professional Studies Advanced Consortium for Cooperation, Conflict, and Complexity in the Earth Institute. You know what it is with people in PhDs, they got these long behind titles for these programs that what does it really do? What does it mean? What it means is that he spends an awful lot of time trying to understand the dynamics that take place locally and on the global stage. Understanding that conflict can take us to some terrible places. But the party doesn't stop there. Because it's one thing to note that we're in a place where dissent can happen. The question then becomes, what does one do about it? All right? And that's the thing that I would like for us to dig in on. The article that you one fine day might be able to see on this PowerPoint, the next line in that statement was, but this is actually good news. And you go, what? January 6th and that kind, is it happening? Okay, right, folks here. right here. What he says, after he says all of these things about our country, this is actually good news. Because studies have shown that chronic, divisive patterns like ours often become more susceptible to change after major disruptions to the status quo. Similar to what we're experiencing today. Now, Nicole and I were talking about this earlier. Nicole, wave Nicole. Nicole and I were talking about this earlier. And she's like, you mean there's more that can happen beyond January 6th? You mean there's more? And there probably is, right? Do we need to kind of like woosah together? Because it's really intense. This has been the story, however, while we're experiencing this here, other parts of the world have experienced this and are presently now more peaceful places. Places like Norway, New Zealand, Costa Rica have had these periods of incredible disruption that threaten to undo the entire country, but it's a kind of necessary upending so that you can get to a place of improving conditions. Dr. Coleman says we must seize the opportunity for a basic reset of the deep structures of division. What does that reset look like? What does it look like? You know what he says? Radical listening. Radical listening. Work needs to be done that builds upon what we know, exactly what Dr. K was saying about your WeTalk. You're building on what we already know that works. We need to be much more intentional about it. We need to promote and facilitate community dialogues across the divide, encouraging people to talk across the divide. And it's being done in a diverse array of disciplines: journalism, education, technology, healthcare. They're popping up like daisies, these opportunities where people are trying to figure out where constituents can have the opportunity to speak with each other. My name is Lisa Gale. as Dr. K said, I'm the Chief Program Officer at StoryCorps. And I want to say that we are grateful at StoryCorps to count Dr. Coleman as one of our advisors of the One Small Step program that Dr. K introduced. That program will be discussed at length by StoryCorps' founder, Dave Isay, tomorrow. I'll be looking for all y'all, because I know I'll be looking for you. I'm thrilled to be with you here today. I get pizza and a chance to kick it with you. Because as much as we've been doing this work and have a lot of science and thought going on, it is the voices of yours that matter.
I'm so sorry.
It's all good to me, okay? It's the voices. So I encourage you to challenge what I'm saying, because I'm going to challenge you at the end of this conversation, okay? So I'm going to encourage you to do the same with me. I'm going to walk you through three things. One, we're going to come out of this with a shared understanding of toxic polarization. Because, I don't like phrases like that that's in the common narrative, and it's kind of like, do we all understand what that is? We're going to also have an appreciation for the theory, we are in an educational setting, for how we might disrupt said toxic polarization. And then we're going to move into the part of the conversation that I can't wait for, where we begin to talk about practically what that looks like. Because we can talk theory up a blue street. But if we're not about getting action, and the action is needed. And I think this is directly applicable to the work that you guys have been immersing yourself in, have been thinking about. And the net, in my final analysis, which is not the most conclusive, it's just based on the fact that I have a passion for this work, is that we, StoryCorps, Western Michigan University, we both want the same things: to counter the current climate of contempt by shining light on our shared humanity and find ways to bring everyday people together. Y'all feeling me? Excuse me, y'all feeling me?
Yes.
Okay. I don't have audio here. I could at least have it here. All right. So let's get started. Who here has heard of StoryCorps? Don't be ashamed. Don't be ashamed, because it's not out there for everybody. All right, cool. I feel it. What do you know about StoryCorps? I saw hands. What do you know about StoryCorps? Yes.
Oral National History Project.
Ooh, that sounded sweet. What else do you know about StoryCorps? Okay. Yes, sir.
It brings people together who already know each other.
It does. Definitely. How do you hear StoryCorps? Is there a place where you hear it? You know what? Forget about it. Quiz over. Let me tell you what it is. Hey, faculty are kind of like, they know the answer, they're like, bring for you. Whatever. In sum, StoryCorps' mission is to preserve and share humanity's stories in order to build connections between people and create a just and more compassionate world. That's it. One more time for the folk in the back. Our mission is to preserve and share humanity's stories in order to build connections between people and create a just and more compassionate world. Over the past 18 years, StoryCorps has invited more than 650,000 individuals to come together, have conversations with a loved one, and sit in a space that we refer to as a sacred space. Now, I want you to kind of I hope you have whipping around in your head social media and the ways in which you talk or maybe don't talk on social media. The idea being that if you come to a StoryCorps booth, it is a sacred space. The lights are low. There are 2 mics that are hanging, and the mics give you license to say things, to speak to your soul. And you are speaking to your future, because what we do is with your permission, those conversations are recorded, and then they are archived at the Folk Life Center, American Folk Life Center at the U.S. Library of Congress. StoryCorps has, if not one of the largest collections of oral history, largest oral history collection at the Library of Congress. So Margaret, check for Margaret. Margaret gets an A.
I'm getting the okay sign from the corner. I just want to let you know.
Are we good?
I believe we are.
Shut the front door! All right. All right, maybe. No. This is the stuff. No, we're not going to play anything yet. This is the article that I was telling you about that Dr. Peter Coleman wrote. I'm going to build up to this. This will be a build for all of us. How's that? All right. So you're in this space, you have this conversation, the conversation is recorded. It takes about 40 minutes. Can you imagine what you would say to someone who's important to you? What you would ask someone who's important to you and spend 40 minutes talking about? What would you want to talk to your special person about? Yeah. Hi, I'm Lisa.
Say your name. Nicole.
Okay, Nicole. What would you like? Somebody in your life. Who's special to you? Yeah, that's still you. It's still you.
My boyfriend.
Okay. I feel you. And what would you want to, again, record for posterity? She's like, oh my God, will she go away? What would you want to ask him? What would you want to ask him about? How about, what did you think when you first met me? Right? What makes you think that we are a thing? Ooh, sucky now, right? But the thing is, you want to have the conversation about those things that are important to you. In some cases, with your boo, it's one thing, right? But if you were talking to your grandmother, if you were talking to your niece, your nephew, if you were talking to your bestie here, the conversation would look different. And that's okay. Because at the end of the day, it's about recording the story of your life, or really interviewing them and getting to know them better. People who have this experience are profoundly shook afterwards. They are shook, and I don't understand why it is. Can I tell you? Can I speak some truth? I don't know if y'all notice, I'm African American. I talk to people all the time. I'm a social worker too. That makes it even more complicated. Okay, I'm talking to people all the time. And the thing is, if I get to sit with you and we get to look at each other and we're this close and we're having our conversation, you're going to say things to me. Because there are very rare forums where we have these kinds of conversations with our loved ones. You know, because everybody's on the Twitter, everybody on the IG, or whatever it is, right? And no shade. You know, those are useful and are helpful resources for a variety of different things. But in the context of deepening our relationships with each other, I would challenge that. Anyway, these stories are available. You get a copy of the story, your partner gets a copy of the story, and it is saved so that future generations, your great-great-grandbaby gonna know about you and your boo. Okay? It's like you get to be able to pass that on to people who are important in your life. She's like, please don't ask me about my boyfriend. All right? So here's the thing. A small segment of these stories are edited, and they are into these poems. Because think of the wisdom that exists even in this room. The things that you could learn from each other. The things that I could learn from you. All of these are captured, edited into these 3-minute poems that every week on Morning Edition, which is a national public radio broadcast, you hear them on Morning Edition. So when I say StoryCorps in a room, most of the time it's like, oh, I hear you on the radio. Well, now what you gonna say, Jeff? I heard you on the radio. And that's part of what we do, and it's a very important part of what we do because it allows these stories to have legs. Because we believe that everyone matters. Every voice is important. A smaller segment of these stories are edited further, are treated visually, meaning that we take the audio and we build animations around them, so that these animations can be shared. Do you know why we did that? Because the young people not listening to the radio, all right? And it's really important for us to reach the young people too. So we actually created these animated shorts. So Dave Isay, who is our president and founder, oh, my papers are messed up. He's our president and founder, will be talking tomorrow a lot about StoryCorps and of our exciting project. He'll dig in much deeper into the organization's history. I want to use this time, like I said, to toggle back and forth with what the ideas are associated with how this applies to the subject that I really want to dig in on, toxic polarization. What's that? Toxic polarization. What is that?
People divided by their opinions and not accommodating each other.
Okay.
And not accommodating dissent.
Okay.
Listening to each other.
Okay.
With a sympathetic mindset, but maybe judging each other.
They're judging each other. It's kind of like polarization on steroids. What is polarization? What is polarization?
Divide, division.
It's just division, right? This idea, thank you, this idea that we are, I might hold a certain set of values and opinions and choices that in a political context happen to reside in a particular space on the ideological spectrum, right? And someone else might hold an opposing view. Polarization in and of itself is not bad. It's part of what is necessary for the debate that is responsible for us growing and evolving our country and our society. The toxicity is the problem. The fact that if we have a separate opinion, I like women. I don't understand what you're doing with a boy. My boyfriend's gonna be real upset with me after that. But no. But it's kind of like, so I suddenly start looking at you and I'm like, what's wrong with you? Why are you doing that? My way is the way to do it. And once I start treating you as if there's something wrong with you, that's just the tip of the iceberg. Then you begin to get into this space where I begin to think of you like there's something wrong with you. Why would you, a dude, really? Why would you do that? And the thing is, the fact is that it gets to a place where it just keeps getting darker and darker, to the point where it is no longer about the fact that we have different opinions. I don't see you as human. I don't see you as somebody who's even worth it. So I can do whatever to you because you're not even a real person. This goes sideways really, really fast. Now, I just want to go back and cycle back and say, polarization exists. It's okay for people to disagree. This isn't about whether you disagree or not. It's about how you feel about those individuals. Who has that member of their family who just says the most wackadoodle things come Thanksgiving? Oof. You see that sigh? Now let's see if it works. No, not that one, the next one. That one, yeah. So before we start it, wait. And if you get it started, I'm just going to let it go. So imagine the tale of, in our family relationships, there's this disconnect sometimes, right? But it's family. And let's see how sometimes that plays out. Roll that fabulous bean footage. Can't hear. All right. Well, I'll just have to tell you this way. How long is it on? Can you make it a joke? Very good. Yep. If anybody
wants to grab another pizza, piece of pizza. No, this is not a good time to grab two more pizza.
I think I want to.
Featuring polarization within a family context.
I think I want to be remembered, first of all, as a God-fearing man. Sometimes I'll be known as someone that might have been a little bit of a pain to get along with, but I don't think there's anybody that can't say that I didn't show them love. How about you?
I want to be remembered as a hard worker. I want to show people that I care and treat everyone with kindness and respect because we all deserve that. When you think about the future, what are you most scared of and what are you most hopeful for?
I think what I'm most scared of are my grandparents and what they may have to deal with in the future. Nuclear war, our resources being depleted.
What I'm most afraid of is that we'll keep getting divided, but all wrapped in that, I'm hopeful because you and I come from, maybe different backgrounds and maybe different political views and maybe different religious views, but none of that has ever stopped us from being a family.
If we still lived in the circumstances from years ago, or the way things were years ago, we would probably never know each other. There were some things that I taught when I was a young man that would have never allowed us to even have a conversation. But I thank God that He gave me the knowledge to understand what love really means.
Does it bother you that we don't agree about politics?
No, it doesn't bother me. Being different shows us the different sides of things. We may be different in a lot of things, but we agree in a lot of things, and I think we listen to each other in a lot of things. You're precious to me. You really are.
Featured, obviously, the story of two people who knew each other, who were having conversations about the conflicts and that they were having. Again, the longer conversation was much more involved. We edited it down to this bit, but it gives you a flavor of a phenomena that you can have polarization, and within families, because there's a vested interest, you really are not going to take out your uncle. You might want to. I sure want to take out mine. But the thing is, you're not going to. And so for us, it felt like this was interesting. And this was part of what StoryCorps had been doing all the time. The perseverance and the beauty that comes from the conversations with individuals who are remarking upon their own experiences in this country. Because sometimes your conflict isn't just with another individual, it's with a country and the way in which it approaches certain phenomena. Okay? So the next piece that we're going to take a look at tells the story of Dr. Lynn Weaver. He was raised in Knoxville, Tennessee, and Dr. Weaver learned first that there are people who did not want him to succeed. And he had to figure out how to persevere against that. Can we hear his story, Nicole, maybe?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. I am so excited by this.
As soon as we got into the school, the principal was calling the roll. He said, "Bill Weaver." And I said, "My name is William." And he said, "Oh, you're a smart N-word." I'd been in school maybe 30 minutes, and he suspended me. I don't remember a day that a teacher did not tell me that I didn't belong. We'd have a test, and they'd stand over me, then just snatch the paper out from us and time's up. The first report card, I got all F's, including phys ed. So I've gone from being a good student to starting to think, well, maybe I don't belong. Maybe I am done. I was home one evening wondering what I'm going to do when there's a knock on the door, and it's my 7th grade science teacher from the black school, Mr. Hill. He said, "I understand that you're having some trouble, And I said, yeah, Mr. Hill, I think they're trying to run me away. And he said, what I need you to do is to come back to the junior high school after school every day and Saturday mornings. He said, can you do that? I said, yes, sir. And so every day, waiting for me would be Mr. Hill with assorted other teachers, the English teacher, the math teacher, and they tutored me. And once I got past those F's, I stopped doubting myself. But learning became almost a spiteful activity to prove the teachers at the high school wrong. And no matter what I did, academically or athletically, I was never recognized at that school. I never had a conversation with the counselor about going to college. But during my senior year, I got a letter saying you've been awarded a scholarship. So I ended up going to Howard University. And 37 years after I left high school, I met my older brother's funeral, talking to Mr. Hill. And I said, you know, Mr. Hill, if I had not gotten that scholarship, I don't know what would have happened. And I don't know how I got the scholarship because I never even applied for it. And he said, I know, because I filled in the application and sent it off for you. So Mr. Hill stepped in and I believe saved my life. And at the time, I didn't realize how much I was being helped. And that's the ignorance of youth and the wisdom of age. When you look back on it, you say, how did I get here? How did I make it? Because people help you, whether you knew it or not.
The thing I want you to be listening for, Dr. Weaver went on to record perhaps more StoryCorps interviews that ended up being edited for Morning Edition than any other person in our canon. And I bring it up here because the point I want to make is this. The work that has to be done in order to kind of like address to disrupt the current state of affairs is not something that can be done by one person. There needs to be many people who are involved in the course of this. So it cannot be just a single person. I don't know that Dr. Weaver's story fixed racism in this country. In fact, I can tell you it hasn't. But what it has done is it provides a certain measure of support and hope for those of us who are here so that we can dig in and try to get some stuff done, right? I want to give you one illustration of toxic polarization. The idea because you hold a certain view, you're less than human. You know, this whole idea, how could you support that guy? It moves from disagreement to rancor to animus to eventually we think violence. It's the thing that's at the bedrock of slavery, the Holocaust, genocide. The issues that you are really working with are being addressed because there are people who don't see others as human, and that is problematic. Think about what would happen if folks stepped up. Let's take a look at this story featuring the experiences of Asma Jama, a Somali and Muslim. I share it not because not all the stories that we produce are pleasant. I suspect your studies and circumstances of people who are having to figure out different ways they hold their identities, that could be problematic. It's an issue. I want to issue a trigger warning here. The following animation features references to violence. We do not condone violence, but we are about getting the stories from the individuals as they are experiencing them. Okay, so when I say editing, I don't mean that we're going in and we're fixing and we're, kind of like changing language. These are in the participants' words. Okay?
I want to reach out to you so much. I just wanted to know that you were okay. That was my biggest concern.
That was my biggest concern too. I used to be carefree. I used to go everywhere by myself. I would say hi to strangers. But after what happened to me, I felt like I had to look over my shoulder every time I go outside.
I'm so sorry you had to go through that.
Did you stop talking to her because of what she did to me?
I did, yeah.
Why can't you forgive her?
Because then it's telling Jody that it's okay, and it's not okay. Do you feel like you can't speak while healing in public anymore?
Yes, because I realize I don't belong. I have to prove myself every single day. And it makes me feel like I had to give up a lot of who I was.
I'm going to pray that you can eventually become that person you used to be.
I will get there. It's going to take me a while. But for you to stand up for somebody you don't know and to say that what she did was unacceptable, that meant the world to me.
I will support you in any possible way I can. You know, you say blood stick in the body, you stand behind your family no matter what. Well, you gotta draw a line somewhere. And you're my line.
Thank you.
Y'all good? Anything was, the crying happens sometimes. I mean, if you need to do that, it's okay. It happens. I kind of feel like we should have a contract with Kleenex or something. The reason why I showed this was not to upset you, honestly. We have similar concepts that are coming up: belonging, and the fact that people are not feeling as if they belong. The need for someone to step up and say that's not right. The need for people to be seen and heard, right? And I'm not just talking about the individuals who are experiencing the atrocities. I'm talking also about, others like them. I'm talking too about the people who are, and again, I don't want to amplify the voices of people who are doing things that are reprehensible. But what I do want to do is I want to hear. I want to understand. There's a part of me that wants to understand. And I'm wondering if for some of you, perhaps that's something that you're feeling as well. So now I'm going to put down my notes, because now this becomes about you. Not you, you're good. What can we do about toxic polarization? What can we do? Thoughts? Well, that's a bloody. Can I? What can we do? Talk to each other, right? We believe, and this is not just a belief set, it's not just faith, it's none of that kind of stuff. The science tells us that by having contact with someone who is not like me, the chances of me seeing them and understanding them means that the feelings of contempt that I have could possibly begin to melt away. So as much as StoryCorps, we're all about people having conversations with those who, their loved ones, we've started this new program, One Small Step. And its goal is to invite people to see someone who is on the other side. How can you see someone who's on the other side? Well, we create content. And our content provides opportunity for individuals to see and hear folk who are having these kinds of conversations and getting a lens in. Because by watching that, that's a form of contact. For the even more creative or the more courageous among us, we invite individuals to have conversations with people who are polar opposites, complete strangers. We have completed more than 1,000 interviews to date. These are individuals who just raise their hand and say, I would like to have a conversation with somebody who is not like me, because I really want to understand them better. When I say not like me, I'm particularly focused on the political context. Even more specifically, I'm suggesting that we're inviting liberals and conservatives to sit down with each other. I have a wait list of 6,000 people. There is a hunger and a desire to do this. The reason why the wait list is so long is because it takes so much for us to be able to match people. It's a whole other story. I can kind of like, over pizza, I'll discuss all the things that make that wait list happen. But the net result is that there is demand for this. Contact theory espouses that contact between two groups can promote tolerance under certain conditions, such as having common goals. The fact that you are ideologically different doesn't mean that there aren't other things that we have in common. So you know what we do? You sign up for a one small step interview, not you. I mean, if you want to, that's fine. But I'm not trying to sell anything. All right. You sign up for a one small step interview. You fill out a survey, asks you a lot of questions about yourself, because we're going to use that survey to match you with someone. Okay? So you fill out the survey, and we ask you to write a short paragraph biography of who you are. We go through a whole lot of processes. Boy, there are processes. And then we identify, not your match, because you found your match, but your match. We identify your match. And you come to the space. You and I are going to sit there. What's your name?
Colin.
Colin! What up? You and I got to get out of these. These heels are killing me. All right. We sit together, and what I will do is I will read your bio to you. Okay. You will read my bio back to me. And then from that, we start off on conversation. Because there'll be questions that I will have about things that he has done. Now, can I tell you a little secret of the matching? We're looking for people who have a little something in common, right? They might have grew up in the same neighborhood, right? They don't have to be ideologically the same. And we tell them in this conversation, I don't know how to say this to you, don't talk politics. Do not discuss politics, because if you start talking politics, it's going to go sideways real quick. One person's going to try to kind of like one up the other and all this kind of stuff. No. What we want to have happen is you have conversations where you get to know each other, you get to see each other. Do you know what happens after these conversations? Because Colin and I are going out for a drink after this. We're going to get coffee. We're going to hang out, because now Colin's like, and it becomes, you know, I didn't know Colin was that kind of dude. He's kind of cool. And I'm not trying to hit on you. I got a boyfriend. He's really, it's not like that. All right, but the thing is, it's kind of like I am going to want, and a lot of people who do this suddenly say, you know what, I want to get coffee with this individual. I want to sit down and talk to him a little bit more. Outside without outside of all of that, I want to get to know this other individual. What we haven't yet found, and because this is not a perfect story, we're building this, right? I want to see that the connection gets generalized. So I begin to think about all people wearing Western Michigan hats. I like them all just because I met Colin. We haven't seen that yet. But what we have seen is stronger connection between individuals, and we think that that is one small step toward addressing the issue of toxic polarization. Our game plan, threefold: raise awareness about toxicity of the environment, invite people to see and listen to these conversations, and for those who feel up for it, have the conversation. We are poised to move. I'm going to admit that we're kind of building a car and driving it at the same time. There's a little bit of that. But we have done a whole lot of research to try to understand what is behind this. We find that the demand is significant. We've gotten support of funders. The work is hard. It's time-consuming and laborious. But we do it because it takes tremendous courage for people to be up in this space. So I'm going to ask you, what do you want to do about toxic polarization? How do you want to address it in your sphere, on this campus, in your classrooms, with your peers? What does that look like? Because you know there's some people here who have different views about what you're supposed to be saying and not saying. Right? There are a bunch of people who are doing that, right? And so part of it is by having convenings and the opportunities for people to talk. But I'm going to tell you what I secretly want to see happen here. I want you all to sign up and do these interviews. I want you to take a look at our content. I want you to come tomorrow to hear Dave. See, I'm only an okay speaker. I don't do this all the, well, actually I do. But I'm only an okay. He understands. That man eats, sleeps, and breathes this thing. So I invite you to come listen, hear, take it in, and ask yourself. Again, it doesn't have to be StoryCorps, because there's an entire cottage industry now of organizations that are trying to figure out how we can build bridges. And that is what we think can happen. And all that Peter Coleman has suggested, radical listening, engage with others in the building of community, and also think about ways in which you can join up and participate in bridge building efforts. This one or any other, I don't care. But just please, this is a special time in your lives. I hate to sound, that sounds so paternalistic, and it sounds so like condescending. Maybe because I'm old. But I really want to encourage you to kind of like think about the ways in which you're doing this work. I want to celebrate you, I want to congratulate you for your WeTalk effort. It sounds amazing. I'm trying to figure out how to partner. Margaret didn't know, I'm about to roll up on her, right? But trying to figure out how to do this, because the thing is, where you are in a powerful position. Because you're in a place of thinking, exploring, and because there's a certain, dare I say, recklessness to youth that I love, that is necessary for the kind of change that we need to make happen here. So with all of that, I'm going to sunset. I'm going to exit stage left, unless you all want to talk about some stuff. Who wants to yell at me about what we're doing? Go ahead. Go ahead, brother from another mother. What you got?
Too easy for me, but let's go. I have a question. Yeah. So I think in my generally, whenever I meet people, they have very different ideas, very different thoughts about stuff. I generally don't talk about politics. I generally don't talk about religion, but we talk about common grounds, interests, and I make a lot of friends. The problem is when we start talking about politics. So after this, what do you think? If we start talking about things that really matter, politics, religion, which of course necessary conversations to have, I think the polarization starts again. What do we do then?
Well, again, not if you have the foundation of knowing. See, the thing is, a lot of the isolation that Dr. K talked about at the top is problematic. Right? We really don't know people. When we started this program, we invited people to come, bring somebody who's on the opposite side of a political divide and have a conversation. And everybody was like, huh? Because folk don't have those connections. So I think when you have those connections, again, this is the way it used to be like 40, 50 years ago, right? Political debate could happen. I didn't want you dead because we didn't agree. I could see you as an individual with whom I want to interact with and willingly do that because, as Robert Putnam talked about, we bowled together, we hung out together. There was all this incredible social capital that was being cultivated in my community, and I interacted with people. Now we don't do that. We sit at home on the IG doing all this, and we don't know people. So I think we have to do this step before we get to that step. And I'll further say, like I said, StoryCorps ain't the only game in town. There are organizations out there that will train you on how to have those conversations. My project is called One Small Step. I'm just trying to get you to take that one small step. Other questions? How you doing with your boo? How long you guys been dating? I'm sorry. Any other questions? Sir?
Sure, I would take it, I know most of the people in the room, And beautiful start to this, but I would love to have my students think about this. We've talked about it much. And my wonderful, beautiful Pakistani friends yesterday, the idea of familiarity, and I'm a true believer in this. However, there are contexts of power, and this introduces this idea. And again, still fresh in my mind, whether we would look at a Rwanda, a Bosnian genocide, look at it historically in the United States. I can know you very well. I can be sympathetic. And yet right now we have cousin killing cousin in Russia and Ukraine. We have families split. Why? Because it is their assignment in a power structure. You could have a choice, but it's not much of a choice at that point. And so you can have great sympathy, empathy for the other side, and yet you're cast in the most severe vitriolic situations, and by that I mean killing each other. Not even by volition, you are cast into that role.
Right.
My Indian and Pakistani friends yesterday, how many wars between India and Pakistan? More than 2. And yet they said, oh, we're so similar. We share so much, and yet at the drop of a hat. And so sometimes, this is a sign by a stroke of a pen, and then we're in a new situation. What do we do with that?
I don't know.
What's the relationship between one small step? But I'm serious about
I hear you. I hear you. Let me tell you, one of the things, I mentioned contact theory, right? And contact theory, there are certain conditions under which contact theory will work. Among those conditions is that there has to be a level playing field between the participant. If there is a power imbalance, if one is being told and the other one is not, it will not work. I don't care how much contact you have. If somebody is telling me to do this, so it's not an applicable theory. So that's why I say somewhat blithely that I don't really have an answer to what you're talking about, because the bedrock theory for us is that. Now let me also add another circumstance where it doesn't work. At the extremes. If you have people who are at the extremes, the folks there's a group out of England, More in Common, that has done work to help us understand polarization and the way it looks in this country. They have a typology of individuals, not just by ideology, but kind of like almost a continuum. Ideology is really an unfair way to characterize people. That said, there are folks who are on the radical ends, the very, very radical and very, very conservative ends, who should not be involved. That's another thing that you're bringing to bear when you're talking about the work that you're doing. And that's why I completely go blank, because I don't intend on talking to, have someone from QAnon talk to someone from BLM. Hard pass. That's going to be a conversation, yikes, all right? I'm not going to do that. But what I will do is I will invite perhaps their membership or people who could countenance the possibility of that conversation going on between. Because if the power imbalance is off, if people are feeling as if they have no control, no agency, it's not going to stick. It's not going to stick at all. Yes, Jordan.
I'm curious if these types of conversations, even if they don't work in the extreme and have to take into account the power structure, if they create context for the larger public to turn down the heat. And that it isn't necessarily because I support BLM, I have people in my family who are on QAnon, and we can talk about different things. And I think part of what I see in this type of project that I'm curious about, and would be curious about your all's thoughts about, because I don't research genocide, is if the general public is able to be less polarized with even 6 people around them that they did not already know. Is there a factor where that actually grows into the general public's disinterest in media and other things that promote the toxic polarization?
That was to you all.
Yeah.
That was to y'all. I have an answer, but that's to y'all.
I'd like to add my point to it. My name is Dr. Simon Jaffrey. I teach at the University of Sindh. A lot of my work has to do with female learner identity. So we do discuss a lot of identity texts. Because being at a university in Pakistan, we normally are not supposed to encourage students to bring up political views and religious views. That is one thing. But then I have recently, because as Dr. K pointed out, that there are power relations not just at the macro level, but there are power relations involved in the micro level of interactions as well. For example, my interaction with Dr. Lisa, I suppose again it has got some power relations because I put you above me, and the same thing happens back in my classroom when I am there and they are here. So even the way we are positioned here, there is some power in the way we are positioned. And that also defines our sense of belonging.
It does.
Maybe you guys belong together and I belong
right.
here. So those power relations are there. But then how I have tackled it, I would like to talk about my context as a female teacher. That number one, we do recognize that there is power, not overlooking it. Number two, I try to encourage my students to do share their stories if they cannot share verbally because of cultural issues. Recently, I have given them this project. We call it text, little texts of identity. We call them. So I encourage my students, males or females, to go and record a 3 to 7 minute video on their mobile devices of anything which they think has had an impact on their identity. And those students have brought political stuff, they have brought, because the things are there. And technically it's not politics, so I cannot be held accountable. It is their identity. But then of course religion is there. And there is power. Then even your sexual orientation, that is there, and there is power. I know that there is an LGBT student in my department who either has to identify with the males because he has to go to the male restroom. There is power out there. But then I feel it empowering that in a way they could, in a roundabout way, because they cannot speak, so they would bring up text of identity, and then we have their screening within our in groups, not involving the out groups. And that has been useful for me as a researcher, as a teacher.
Yes, absolutely. Here's the thing that I spend a lot of time thinking about. We know that we're having impact on individuals. What's happening is the anxiety that people are feeling about relating with individuals across the ideological divide. Once they have done this, folk feel better. Colin and I are, right? Feel better. The question is, what does it look like on a macro sphere? What is the impact that happens across a society when a number of us do this? So what? Okay, fine, we're feeling good, that's great. Social worker in me is like, yay. But the macro social worker in me is kind of like going, how am I shifting things? What is happening? And I have a theory that is not mine, but it's out of Yale, Princeton, that I'm losing faith in, but I want to hold on to it. If you have a conversation, and you have a conversation, and you have a conversation, and we're all together, and you then get on your social media and you talk about having had this conversation, or you talk to the person in class and you talk about how you had this conversation. If I did a poll then of all of us, some would say, we have conversations here across the divide. So some of the polarization that you're talking about that's happening in other contexts doesn't happen here at Western, right? I'm not going to claim that there's a shift in social norms. I'm not ready for that. However, there is a shift in the perception of public norms. Because now suddenly I have these ambassadors of the idea who are participating, taking it in, and, forgive the expression, got religion, and are sharing it with others. Just the fact that it's being shared out can be reported, because I'm a scientist on the back of it. So it can be reported out that there is a shift in how it is that we're understanding. So some of what you were looking for, Jordan, exists, because what can happen then is there's this awareness on a macro level that the tide is tilting here at Western. Okay? Y'all good? What y'all gonna do next then? I'm sorry. I was a community organizer. What you gonna do next? Yes, Dr. K.
I don't know how much you want to go on yet, and it's.
No, because it's late, because look at this.
Yeah, and so I want to be deferential to to your
Schedule. Well, everybody's good.
Are you feeling?
Aside from the shoes, I'm good.
Let's get to the point of how much do numbers matter. I'm thinking about the arc of this. Is that, this is the idea of one-on-one conversation. Absolutely believe in it. And all of a sudden, I'm thinking about the long arc of history when I think of what brought down the Berlin Wall, right? And right now, we're getting that reflection, fresh in my memory, is that when young Russian boys turn around, like they did in World War I, they march out. And the contagion of those conversations, the kitchen table conversations, which are not being recorded in these conferences. And then all of a sudden, this contagion, and that's where, okay, here's one-on-one, times a million.
Yeah.
And you get this spread, and we've seen that, whether it's civil rights movement, South Africa, in terms of, if anyone's familiar with the history, World War I, Christmas, organic piece of the trenches, famous story of people just saying, we're not doing the same.
Yeah.
And it was a result of what becomes cliche about a shift in consciousness, a shift in that general perception. And then I wonder about the power of these things, right, to communicate them. The efforts to manipulate it on one hand, and this becomes the question, right, of, is that a machine of intolerance, or is this a machine of tolerance and liberation? It appears to me to be both right now. Any sense of that? In terms of what this
You could say the same thing about the media.
Sure.
The media is just as much a culprit as it is a way out. The perception that we hold about the media, particularly public media and those resources, is that they can be put to public service use. There has to be intention in terms of how they do that. So I just, you heard me almost castigate social media. Almost. Not quite. You know why? Because when you record your interview and you pop on Instagram and say, hey, I just did this thing or whatever, suddenly it's of use, right? Because what's happening is this person's experience is now going to get populated. I don't know that everybody is going to have the will or appetite to have a conversation. It's hard for people to think about doing that. There are a lot of people who want to. There are a lot of people who don't. And I think just like with anything else, we need to have both passive and active ways in which people can engage. That's why I think the content is of value, because it becomes a way in which I'm just sitting there flipping through my whatever you flip through. What is it, Twitter? The Twitter. Flipping through my something, and I can see stuff that actually is, oh wow, look at what happened to this individual or this circumstance, and it stays with me. I can have the same visceral reaction to that thing that I'm flipping on the thing, right, as I do to the face-to-face conversation. So my numbers are going to look good no matter how. So it's not just about, the 1,000 or the 6,000 who's waiting. It's about every week I have 14 million, now 12 because the pandemic has cut the number of people who are driving in their cars, 12 million people who are listening to StoryCorps pieces. If I figure out a platform and I got a CMO who is hell-bent, oops, did I say that out loud? On getting to a place where we put this thing on blast. And she does her job, I do my job on the ground, I'll get to the numbers. And the data is suggesting to me that with the numbers, then you begin to have that kind of like cascade effect that results in the kind of thing that Jordan was talking about, where you have groundswell. So people like to say to me, how many interviews do you want? As many as I can get. Because right now, we're still building it out. So I'm still trying to understand just the power of the one. I don't think the one will get it for us, but I think we can get a lot of people to do this and then talk about doing it, and that'll carry us over.
Do you guys have a podcast, or have you thought about getting a podcast?
Yes! We got a podcast. We have the weekly broadcast. We have the animations. The archive, we recently made the archive publicly accessible. So you could actually go on the archive and listen to people's stories. So not just your story, but listen to stories of others. And we're finding that people are wanting to pay attention to that too. Oh yeah. Doesn't have as large an audience as I would like, that podcast, but we're working on it. We're working on it for a lot of reasons that have nothing to do with the quality of what we're doing. Other questions? Colin, am I done? You think I'm done here, Colin? You think I'm done? And you can say I'm done. You can like say it's a wrap, Lisa. Go. Right? We good?
Why don't we move to the after party?
There's an after party.
There's an after party.
Well, I have to wear these
After
boots.
party is something that's- Hey, that's a beautiful hour with you right there.
Thank
And
you.
that was our schedule.
Thank you.
So, and can we give it up for